Once again, welcome to Peru.
Well, I am so honored to be at this incredible meeting. I've heard about CADE for many years, but this is my first time here, and I think it's particularly interesting and exciting and important that we're meeting in the Highlands, not in Lima, because I think that's part of the future of Peru. And I think it's very interesting and important that we're meeting at a public school, because I think that's part of the future of Peru. And I'm so pleased that we have so many leaders here from the private sector, from government. I'm very honored that the presidential candidates, a number of them, are here today. And I think we're here to talk about a subject that we all care about, which is how to ensure a very bright future for this country of Peru. Not just for a few people, but for all Peruvian citizens. And this is a topic and a question where really this whole process for me began 1 year ago. Some of you may have been there when I was here a year ago and talked about competitiveness. And as I was here and as I was talking to many of you about the country, about what was going on, I got a sense that there was a real opportunity to change. And as a result of that, with the help of a number of you, we have been through a process over the last 12 months of bringing together people, talking about ideas, collecting data, and trying to come up with at least a starting point for some strategic thinking and action planning for the next chapter of Peru's economic history. And it's that work that I'd like to talk about today. I don't want to imply that this work is the last word. In fact, what I'd like to suggest is this work that I'm going to present today is just the beginning of the discussion. But hopefully, all of you in Peru can have a constructive discussion about the future with a common framework and with a common set of ideas and principles for thinking about what will determine the future success of this economy. Now, I know that you've already heard from quite a few speakers during this conference, and I see that I'm having to compete a little bit with, but I'll go slow, and I'm fine. I know President Toledo a little bit. Welcome. I know you've heard from a number of other speakers, and I know that you've heard a variety of opinions, and I would like to suggest that I think you're going to find that much of what you've heard is going to be very consistent with what I have to say. But what I'm going to try to provide you in this presentation is with a lot of data and with a lot of evidence that I think hopefully will make what we know needs to be done even clearer. And we'll start to put in place some of the structure and process and goals that are necessary to move Peru forward. Just to kind of summarize what I'd like to say today, I'd like to make 6 major points. So as before we get into the details, let's just think about the big message here. The big message is we have 6 fundamental agendas in Peru. Number 1, we have to agree that it's time for the next chapter for Peru. We can't just keep repeating the last chapter and rereading the last chapter. It's time for the next chapter. And we have to figure out what the next chapter is. And in order to do that, we have to be very sophisticated because we can't do everything. So number 1, it's time for the next chapter. Number 2, we need a strategic vision for the future economy of the country that everybody understands at some level. that people can get excited about, and that will put us on that path that we all want to get to ultimately, which is a prosperous country where prosperity is shared among all the citizens. Number three, that strategic vision is going to have a critical component, which is economic diversification. The country will not be able to be successful in the long run unless it can diversify its economy substantially, and that's going to happen in two basic ways. One is we're going to have to build some clusters outside of our traditional fields of expertise, and number two, Peru is going to need to create some regional hubs besides Lima. If 5 years from now or 10 years from now all the economic activity in Peru is still mostly in Lima, we'll fail. We've got to create some other hubs, and we've got to have a strategy for doing that. So that's number three. Number four, in order to pursue an economic strategy for the country, we need to set some measurable goals about what we can achieve over the next 10 years or so. And I'd like to propose 11 goals. It would be nice if it was only 10. But I'm going to propose 11 goals because I think these are the right 11 goals. Now, this is not the end of the discussion. There may be 15 goals, there may be 12, there may be 10, there may be 8. But we need some clear, measurable goals that will give us a clear sense of kind of how can we tell whether we're going to make it. And so we'll talk about some goals. Number 5, what I've found is that success in economic development is partly a function of strategy, but it's just as much a function of organization, how we organize in order to actually carry out economic policy. And so I'd like to propose at least some preliminary thoughts about an organizational structure for Peru's future economic strategy. And then finally, number 6, if any of this is going to be truly successful, the private sector of Peru, you, are going to have to play a somewhat different role than you played in the past. You're going to have to do some different things. You're going to have to organize yourself in some different ways. You're going to have to broaden perhaps your field of vision. You're going to have to take on some roles that you haven't taken on before. And your willingness and ability to do that is going to have everything to do with the success of the country. These are 6 fundamental agendas that I believe are going to allow this country to achieve the promise that we all know it has. Now, I respect Al Gore a lot, but I think he was too optimistic. I don't think it's automatic that Peru is going to be successful. I think there's a great opportunity, better than most, but it's not automatic. We have to get on the same page. We have to have a strategy. We have to figure out how we're going to organize. That's going to allow this country to be successful. Now, I'm going to start in just a few moments showing you slides. And slides are both a blessing and a curse. They're a blessing because they allow you to see pictures and numbers. They're a curse because you get bogged down in them. I'm going to go through these data very quickly with you because I think it's important that you see these data. But I also want to say that these slides that I'm going to show today are going to be made available to any of you, all of you. And I would suggest that we not worry too much about covering every point, but we try to understand really the big picture. And we'll make these slides available to you. We also are preparing a written report, a paper that summarizes the work that's been done here in Peru over the last 8 to 10 months. So there's going to be lots of opportunity to look at the details. What I'm going to try to do in this presentation is kind of focus on the big messages, the big picture, show you some of the critical pieces of data, but without trying to cover everything. And that's going to mean that I might be skipping fairly rapidly over material. I hope you'll forgive me for that, but I don't want to take so much time that we kind of lose energy and that we kind of lose the big message. So let's begin. how do we think about Peru's economy? How we think about how Peru needs to go? How we think about what steps need to be taken? What should that future strategy be? How do we approach that question? Well, in order to think about the question, I think we have to sort of step back and understand kind of where is the country in its economic development. And I think most of you know the general story pretty well. This has been an economic growth success story for at least the last decade, both compared to your own history, but also in comparison to many peers. You all know this picture. This is GDP per capita, and this is how it's looked over the last 60 or 70 years in Peru. There was a history of growth, then there was a fairly long period of going in the wrong direction, and beginning in the early 90s, the country got back on the right trajectory, and we can see that progress is good today. The strength of this economy has been manifested by the degree to which you were able to deal with this economic crisis without massive disruption that we've seen in other parts of the world. In terms of GDP per capita, Peru has been growing rapidly. You're up in the better league, the big league. You're not growing as fast as China or Vietnam or India, but you've been growing pretty darn fast. And you've kind of worked your way up in terms of prosperity. You're working your way up nicely. This is enormously positive. One of the key reasons for this success has been some sound macroeconomic policies. This country has had very good macroeconomic management since the mid-90s. It's because of trade opening that you've been willing to undertake, which is scary, and many Latin American countries have had a hard time pursuing. We've also, of course, been in a very supportive international environment for most of this period until the last year or two, which has allowed growth to be a little bit easier than had been in the past. So we've got to recognize that, but there's no doubt that policies that were set worked, and they're still working, and we should be proud of that. In terms of exports, Peru is not yet a very high exporting country, given its size. But as you see here, you've been gaining world export share over the last 10 years. You've kind of worked up in terms of exports as a percentage of GDP. You're not high for a country of your size, but you're getting there. And the question is, can we keep this momentum moving? Can we keep improving the trade, the ability to export? Can we broaden that ability, as we'll see later, is critical. One of the other critical conditions for this success, historically, has been the ability to achieve security and stability. Political stability, economic stability, and kind of a sense of peace and security. And of course, that is no means guaranteed for the future. In fact, recently, I think the challenges are becoming even apparent again of how hard it is for a country to actually do that. All these things are good. But as we look at our performance in Peru, we all know, I hope, we all know that it's not a complete success. It's not a complete success yet. For a variety of reasons. Number one, there's been a lot of heterogeneity. Not everybody has benefited from this economic growth. And that's particularly clear, of course, when we look at things like unemployment. Given a very rapidly growing economy, it's quite surprising to see that unemployment hasn't gone down. And that's because our growth is driven by fields that don't employ a lot of people. And we haven't found a way to share that growth in more jobs in more fields. We all know that. We've made a big stab at knocking down poverty, but it's still high. And it's very heterogeneous. As we look across the country, we see enormous divergence in poverty rates in different parts of the country.